People are asking me a lot about moving to Chesapeake and is it worth it to move to Chesapeake or Virginia Beach? Questions come up. Is it worth it? Is there not enough to do? What's the environment in Chesapeake? Is it worth risking moving to the city and find out I don't like it? Lots of questions swirl around because Chesapeake is kind of a mysterious city because it kind of gets overshadowed by Virginia Beach and often Norfolk. And so what I want to do is give you 10 rules to follow in 2025 if you plan to move to Chesapeake so you won't make mistakes about where to decide to move and if you should move at all. So the first rule is be very familiar with Green Briar. Knowing how far you are away from Green Briar, if you're in Chesapeake, will greatly affect your experience in the city. The thing about Chesapeake is that if you live in Chesapeake and you're not too far away from Green Briar, you might experience the same thing you might find in Virginia Beach, just to a little bit lesser scale. You got multiple grocery stores in there. Harris Teeter, a Kroger is nearby. Nice Kroger, a big one. Green Briar Mall, which is, while it's not much now, was like the prime mall in the 1990s. It is now just sold at auction and is going to be redeveloped and turned into a full new environment, mixed use most likely, restaurants, things to do. And there's a Green Briar area plan that has been projected that has been just been voted on in the last few weeks that I think will be rolled out here pretty soon too. So changes are happening in Green Briar that made what it was 20 years ago the best part of Chesapeake now is going to be redeveloped into an area that is going to, I think, increase the values of property in Green Briar as well. So neighborhoods like Bayberry Forest, Logan's Mill, Mill Lake Quarter, Essex Meadows, Battlefield Commons, Woodbriar. Ashley Woods is another good example. You've got townhouses, small single-family houses, large 4 or 5 bedroom houses all through this part of Green Briar that could increase in value because of the revitalization. You also have Summit Point, which is the new kind of downtown-ish part of Chesapeake, which is in Green Briar as well, which is off of Volvo Parkway. So you've got Green Briar East on one side, Green Briar West on the other side, all around the 64 and 464 and Great Bridge Bypass interchange all through here. So this side here is all the true, like, proper Green Briar here, but then on the west side is Green Briar West, where you got Home Depot, Lowe's, more restaurants, Sam's Club, Walmart, all through this side. Now, Summit Point is right in the middle between Green Briar East and West. It kind of splits right in the middle. This section right here, this is a pretty new kind of downtown-ish part of Chesapeake and of Green Briar, where this is, you got walkable, you got a brewery, you got walkable restaurants, you've got apartments, you've got more businesses in here. Now there's more strip malls across the street, more restaurants. A lot happening in the Summit Point area, which I think is important. So knowing where you are in relation to Green Briar, if you do choose to move to Chesapeake, is going to drastically affect the quality of life and how much you enjoy living in the city for sure. So make sure you know where Green Briar is in relation to where you're planning to move. The next is an important one I think that doesn't get looked at enough is know your signals. Cell phone signal strength. As you go further south into rural parts of town, further going into the country, there's a good chance that you might not have as many strong options for strong cell phone signal. So if you plan to live in Chesapeake and you also plan to work from your house, this might factor in to a certain degree as well. It's not that all the rural areas have these problems, but there's enough. I've gone to enough houses and trying to make a phone call in enough houses to where I've been surprised at, oh yeah, one bar. And so if you do have a real estate agent that lives in the area that is doing all this legwork for you and looking at houses for you and doing virtual tours, while they're there, make sure you ask them what the strength of the cell phone signal is at the house and what cell phone provider that they have. Now, next is make sure you know about the tolls, tunnels, and bridges that go all through Chesapeake and can drastically affect the quality of transportation and quality of life. The reason I say this is because if you zoom out of here, if you notice, the Elizabeth River connects all through Chesapeake. It divides it and it also cuts through the south part as well. So why does that matter? It's because you've got multiple roads that go over the Intercoastal Waterway, the Elizabeth River. Number one is the Great Bridge that goes across Battlefield Boulevard right there. That is a drawbridge. Number one is you got the Great Bridge going across the Battlefield Boulevard road coming from Green Briar all the way down to the south part of Chesapeake. That is a drawbridge. That's not a toll or a tunnel, but it's a drawbridge, and it goes up regularly. Next is going to be the Veterans Bridge that goes over Dominion Boulevard. There's a toll there, so that connects from the north side of Chesapeake over towards the south side, over towards the Grassfield School District area. Next is over in Centerville Turnpike. There's a bridge that connects over on the north side and south side of Centerville Turnpike. This is a drawbridge as well that goes over the Intercoastal Waterway. Now, those are the three primary bridges that cross over that body of water. Two of them are just bridges, but they're drawbridges, and they can be super frustrating. And one of the reasons why I mention this too is when you do, like, you plot out Google Maps and you're trying to figure out if you plan to live on one side of Chesapeake and you go to the other, or you go towards Virginia Beach or Norfolk, Google Maps or another mapping system may not factor in the drawbridge or tolls going from where you're living or planning to live to where you're planning to go. So you might expect, 15 minutes to go from point A to point B. Well, that might not factor in the drawbridge dynamic. That is maybe the most efficient road if the drawbridge stays down, but if it goes up, you might have an extra 5, 10 or more minutes waiting for that bridge to go up and go down. I have more information about the drawbridges down in the description. So if you do plan to live on one side of the area, make sure you factor in where those bridges are going to be. Now, in addition to that, the tolls. I mentioned the Veterans Bridge. Well, there are also some new tolls around 64, going from around 664 to 264 down towards 64. There are HOV lanes, high occupancy vehicle lanes on 64 that have drastically affected the transportation quality going from 664 in Western Branch all the way towards Green Briar. Those have just been installed. Now, those, of course, cost money, but those are going to save you some time because 64 also goes over the Elizabeth River, the high-rise bridge. Now, that's where they've got some tolls, the HOV lanes on one side. So if you want to save time going across that bridge, definitely use the tolls on the left side of the highway. Another main one is the Gilmerton Bridge, which is a drawbridge as well that goes across Military Highway. Not as common, but if you do plan a route through Chesapeake and you want to go from one side, maybe on the east side to the west side of Chesapeake, you might see that the route takes you across Route 13. Just make sure you know that this is the Gilmerton Bridge and you might have a drawbridge lift there as well. Not to mention going over to the west side, like the southwestern side in the Grassfield School District area, close to Route 17, which is George Washington Highway over near Moses Grandy Trail. This bridge, the Deep Creek Bridge right here, this seems small, but man, if you notice, the roads on one side of the bridge and the other, this is kind of like the main interchange you have to go through to get from one side to the other. And if you don't, you have to go kind of around a long way. So this bridge is important because there aren't many lanes. There is construction. It's getting better, I think, eventually. But right now it is construction, not many lanes, and there's backups because this section of road bottlenecks a lot, especially during rush hour. And in addition, of course, you've got the downtown tunnel, the midtown tunnel up towards Portsmouth and Norfolk. Those aren't in Chesapeake, but they do factor into driving through Chesapeake a lot. So those are often important as well. They can affect length of time on the roads too. Now, next is understand the alternative cities to living in Chesapeake. So I mentioned primarily Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Portsmouth, and Suffolk, because those are the closest cities to Chesapeake. So if you do want to, like if you're working in Chesapeake, for example, or close to Chesapeake, you might want to consider some of these cities as well. Virginia Beach is the ultimate in beach access and also suburban dynamics. And of course, a smaller downtown and town center. That is right next to Chesapeake. People forget about the fact that Virginia Beach and Chesapeake are right next to each other. You can drive from one city to the other and not realize you drove across the line. So this is important because if you do look at houses in Chesapeake, consider also parts of Virginia Beach, because the drive distance from parts of Virginia Beach to where you're going to be going might actually be closer, even though it might seem like that it shouldn't be because the location you're going to might be in Chesapeake. It's just that where the cities are configured, you might not have to stay in a certain city to have an easy drive to where you want to go. Next, Norfolk. Norfolk also connects in by water to Chesapeake on the north side. An older city, but also has a downtown area. So even if you don't want to live in Norfolk, being close to there because there's more downtown nightlife, that might be more exciting. Or also driving towards like the Norfolk Navy Base or the Little Creek Amphibious Base is in the north side of Norfolk, and also the airport. But it's an older city, so if you don't like the types of houses you find in Chesapeake, you might like an older, maybe an older feel or smaller house. You have a lot more smaller houses in Norfolk as well. Going over to Portsmouth. Portsmouth is kind of like what you find similar to Norfolk, but just not as big, not as much happening, but you can get cheap houses in Portsmouth. So if you want to go cheaper, consider Portsmouth. Just also do your research on what areas you want to and where you don't want to live. So if you want Chesapeake and you want the rural or small suburban dynamic in Chesapeake, but you don't want to spend as much, consider Suffolk. Or maybe if you want new construction, you can get cheaper new construction in Suffolk, which is over on the western side of the south side of Hampton Roads, which connects to Chesapeake on the west side as well. So it's a big city. So all these cities are the closest to Chesapeake, and they're also good options if you want to pivot to other cities and don't just want to focus on what Chesapeake's situation has to offer. The next is consider school districts heavily before buying. Now, this is not to say that there are certain school districts, I have to say, that are better or worse than others, but you can definitely see on rankings on niche.com, greatschools.org, you can see that there are certain schools that are ranked really high and some that aren't. So what mostly is affected by, to me, school district from the standpoint of making a decision in an investment perspective is knowing that people, when they move to the area, will focus a lot on those rankings. Great schools, niche.com, other places. So places like Hickory, Grassfield, and Great Bridge might have more activity or demand, people that want to buy in those areas as opposed to others that may not be ranked as high. So if you do plan to buy in a certain area, know that when it's time to sell, you might not have as many, or you might have a lot more people ready to buy your house based on those rankings as well. The next is be careful looking at research online. The reason I say this is because if you look at, for example, crime statistics or average drive time or any averages that you'd find about the Chesapeake city, the averages you'll find often are misleading. The reason is because Chesapeake has a lot of different parts to it, and each part is drastically different than the other. So, for example, South Norfolk is right in the north central part of Chesapeake. It has a totally different vibe, totally different population, schools. Everything is drastically different in South Norfolk, which kind of almost feels more like Norfolk than you'll find in a place like Green Briar or South Chesapeake, where you've got Hickory, Grassfield, and Great Bridge all in the south part, which is more rural, a lot more rural. And of course, then you've got the Green Briar area, which is in kind of in between South Norfolk and South Chesapeake, like Hickory, Grassfield, and Great Bridge. Then you go over towards the west side. Western Branch is like Green Briar, but not as populated. It's much further away to the rest of Virginia Beach and Norfolk than other parts of Chesapeake. When you look up Chesapeake as a whole, you're going to get a lot of information that blends a lot of the areas like this together. And I don't think it gives very accurate information because these areas are so drastically different. So when you're researching, instead, get more detailed. Look at school districts themselves. Mention Western Branch as an area like the western part of Chesapeake, or mention South Chesapeake, like mention Hickory, mention Grassfield, mention Green Briar, mention Great Bridge, the area of Great Bridge, or even South Norfolk. Mention those specific areas and get details about that as opposed to the general Chesapeake area. The next is don't be surprised by Chesapeake's jet noise. Well, you may have heard a lot about Virginia Beach's jet noise and me talking about it and running my mouth about it. Chesapeake has jet noise too. So the big place where most jet noise is located is in Virginia Beach at the Oceana Naval Air Station. However, there is another airfield called the Fentress Airfield over near Butts Station, which is right here on the southeastern corner of Chesapeake, right next to Virginia Beach. But the area around the Fentress Airfield has rural parts of town, but also it creeps into suburbia over closer to Mount Pleasant, Centerville Turnpike. Over on this side, which is kind of feels more like Great Bridge and feels more like the country part of the town or city of Chesapeake. Well, this area will have some jet noise in a lot of cases. You'll start hearing it as you get closer and closer to the Centerville Turnpike area, for example. I've heard some people talk about it near Albemarle Acres, and even going further east from there, Albemarle Farms and over in Ravenna. But just don't assume that if you see a house that you like, you will be completely devoid of jet noise, because the Fentress Airfield's real. And if you do find a house near it, you will definitely hear jet noise or potential to hear jet noise. So if you don't like the noise, or if you've heard of the noise, just keep that in mind for planning, because you might not want to live that close to the airfield. Which leads me to my next rule, which is plan at least one trip to Chesapeake before you choose to move here. And the reason I say that is because you can get certain impressions when watching videos, even like mine, or other ways to research about the city. But it's not until you get here that you actually see how country or rural the rural parts are, or how suburban the suburban parts are. And comparing that to, for example, Virginia Beach, which has a lot more suburban feel than Chesapeake does, just a lot more of it. So Chesapeake has less of a lot of things than Virginia Beach does. How loud is that jet noise near Fentress, if that makes a difference to you? How many parks are there close by? What does Green Briar feel like? How easy is it for me to get from the place I want to live to Green Briar or to other shopping areas? And does that make me feel isolated? How far away do I actually want to live away from places that have the most activity? These are the questions that they're very precise. It's like, okay, well, it's not that big of a deal, Sam. The difference is, one area might be 12 minutes away, another area might be 18 minutes away. But because of how Chesapeake feels, that extra 6 minutes could feel like 20 or 30 minutes because of how it feels transferring from one part of the city to the other. So you might feel like you're separate from the rest of the city because you might be more in a rural part of town just because of that extra 6, 7, 5 minutes of driving. So it might completely change how you might feel living in Chesapeake based on how far you are away from different things. So come here one time, make that trip, make sure you feel good about where you plan to live, because a lot of people love it here, but not everybody. So make that trip if possible before you make any big decisions. Which leads me to my next rule about living in Chesapeake is make a plan to meet people in Chesapeake. The reason this matters is because sometimes people feel that kind of that isolated feel in parts of Chesapeake because of what I just mentioned. The drive distance might just feel that much further away from other parts of the area to where you kind of feel insulated to the area that you chose to live in Chesapeake. Chesapeake's an interesting city because it's small enough to where the people that live in Chesapeake often feel like it's a very tight-knit community, but it's also large enough to where in the smallness of it, people don't often leave to go to other bigger places in the country because there are other larger cities nearby. So it's a nice combination of small town feel, but also close to a bigger town vibes as well. So it kind of creates enough stickiness for people to want to stay. So does your neighborhood have a civic league? Does it have an HOA that supports family or community involvement? Go to local coffee shops and local restaurants. Look up city events like the Chesapeake Jubilee, which is at the Chesapeake City Park. Green Briar has a farmer's market. There are local festivals or parades, like even the Christmas parade in Great Bridge, which is a big deal. There are a lot of sports leagues and YMCAs in Chesapeake that you can also get connected with. Book clubs or getting your kids connected to schools or programs, local city or community programs like at the library. All these types of things that can get you connected to other families or other people in the city. And this is a big deal. It can feel very isolating if you're in Chesapeake and you're not connected to anybody because of the surroundings that you're in. And if you're coming from a very busy part of the country, that can be a big drastic change to where you're living in Chesapeake. And so make sure you have a plan to get connected as much as possible to people in the area. So if you can get connected into that vibe, that local small town community vibe, and Chesapeake does offer, and have the mix of that in addition to the bigger city, it's a great combination, which leads to an awesome blend and a great quality of life. Next is consider the chance of school redistricting. Now, I don't have any specific information to give you that I know some hidden thing that schools are getting redistricted here. I have nothing to say about that. But I know in the past, this has happened. New schools have popped up in Chesapeake, for example, Hickory and Grassfield in the last 30 years. Those definitely affected the districting in Chesapeake. And so as the city continues to expand, which I think, again, over time it is doing that slowly but surely, I think there's a decent chance that there might be a new school or schools that might be built to support other areas that are growing. And in doing that, you might see some additional redistricting in other areas to facilitate those new schools as well. So while I don't think a lot of people consider the chances of redistricting happening, that could change property values or, again, maybe where your kids might be going to school in the future. So I do think it's worth considering that as a factor, especially if you live on the edge of the school district you plan to live in. Just keep in mind that while I don't have any information that this is going to happen, keep in mind that there is a chance the school district you plan to live in next might not be that same school district moving forward later on in the future. So if you have any other questions about relocating to Chesapeake or any other parts of Hampton Roads, Chesapeake through Virginia Beach to Williamsburg, let me know. It's what I do. I love helping people relocate to the area. So if you have any questions, I have my contact information in the description. You can call me, email me, or text me, and I'll do whatever I can to help you relocate to the area. And I will see you on the next video.